Hello there, my sleepy lights. Tonight, we ride into Red Dead Redemption. And if you like this collection of Red Dead Redemption stories, please be sure to give us a like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. You can also support us on our Patreon, where you get access to our Spotify playlist and early access to all of these stories. But for now, let's get cozy and step in to the wild, wild west. The sketch wasn't coming right. Arthur Morgan frowned at the page, his pencil hesitating above the half-finished drawing of a hawk in flight. Something about the wings wasn't true. He sighed, closed his journal, and watched the Dakota River slide by, golden in the late afternoon light. In the distance, a deer appeared at the water's edge, cautious and lovely. Arthur drew his rifle with practiced ease, lined up the shot, and squeezed the trigger. The sound echoed across the water. At least something's going right today, he muttered, hauling the carcass onto his horse. Dutch's latest plan had been gnawing at him since morning. Another grand scheme with too many moving parts, too much faith in people's gullibility. And there was Micah, always in Dutch's ear now, whispering poison. Arthur needed the quiet, needed the space to breathe without someone asking him to be their fist or their gun. He was turning toward camp when he heard the shouting. The homestead was small but well kept. Modest cabin with a porch, chicken coop, corral for a few horses. The kind of place Arthur might have built in another life. 3 riders were circling it like wolves, kicking over crates of produce, their laughter sharp and cruel. A woman stood in the yard, her back straight as a ramrod, a boy of about 10 hiding behind her skirt. Mrs. Vance, Mr. Croft's patient is wearing mightily thin, the lead writer called. His voice carried the false cheer of a man who enjoyed his work too much. Just sign the papers. Be the sensible widow everyone expects. This land is mine, Mr. Kane, the woman replied. My husband and I deed, fair and square. Deeds can be reinterpreted. Cain dismounted, stalking toward her. Especially when a property has such valuable water rights. I'm not signing anything. The slap was sudden, vicious. The woman, Miss Vance, staggered but didn't fall. The boy cried out. Arthur didn't remember deciding to move. One moment, he was watching from the tree line. The next, his horse was trotting steadily toward the homestead, his hand resting easy near his revolver. Looks like the lady said no. His voice was soft, almost conversational. Best be on your way. Cain turned, annoyance flickering across his face before he registered Arthur's presence. The gun, the steady, dead-eyed stare that made better men than him reconsider their choices. This ain't your business, mister, said Cain. Ain't yours neither, seems like. Arthur kept his tone light, but his eyes never left Cain's. Way I see it, you're trespassing. A moment stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Then Cain spat, his face twisting into something ugly. Come on, boys. Mr. Croft will want to hear about our new complication. He mounted up, leaning down from his saddle. We'll be back, Mrs. Vance. You can count on that. Arthur watched them ride off, dust clouding behind them. Only when they were gone did he look at the woman. Her cheek was reddening where Cain had struck her, but her eyes were clear and hard. Thank you, she said finally. Arthur nodded. Ma'am. He tipped his hat, turning the horse to leave. I'm Elara, she called after him. Elara Vance. This is my son, Thomas. Arthur paused. Arthur Morgan, he said, against his better judgment. Will they come back, Mr. Morgan? The truth hung between them. Yes, ma'am. Men like that always do. rode away without looking back. But the image of her standing there, defiant, vulnerable, stayed with him long after he'd returned to camp. Three days later, Arthur found himself riding past the Vance homestead again. He told himself it was coincidence, that he was just keeping an eye on the territory around camp. But when he saw the cut fences, the boot prints in the mud that didn't belong to a woman or child, he knew he'd been lying to himself. Ilara was on her knees by the fence, trying to mend it with hands that weren't made for such work. She looked up as he approached, wariness giving way to recognition.
Mr. Morgan.
Miss Vance. He dismounted. Seems you had some visitors.
Every night now. Nothing I can prove.
Her voice was tight with exhaustion.
They cut the fences, scare the livestock. Thomas barely sleeps.
Arthur studied the fence, then the distant tree line. How long has this been going on with Croft?
Since Samuel, my husband, died of fever last winter.
She straightened, pushing hair from her face.
Croft wants our water access. The stream that runs through our property connects to his grazing land. He offered to buy us out for a pittance when I refused.
She gestured at the damaged fence. Arthur knelt, examining the wire. The law won't help.
Deputy Miller might as well be on Croft's payroll.
She laughed, a bitter sound.
Maybe he is.
Arthur stood, brushing dirt from his hands. You should leave, Miss Vance. Men like Croft, they don't stop.
This is our home.
She gestured to the cabin.
My husband died building it. Everything we have is here. Where would we go?
Arthur had no answer for that. Instead, he found himself saying, "All right, I'll fix your fence." It took around an hour. When he finished, Laura offered him coffee on the porch. He accepted, though he knew he shouldn't. Distance was safer. Distance was smarter.
I can't pay you, she said,
as they sat watching the sunset paint the hills gold.
I ain't asking for payment. Then what are you asking for, Mr. Morgan?
A question hung between them. Arthur cradled the coffee cup, feeling its warmth in his hands.
Just passing through,
he said finally.
But I'll keep an eye out if I'm around.
Her smile was small, but real.
Thank you.
The Valentine Sheriff's Office smelled of cheap whiskey and cheaper tobacco. Deputy Miller barely looked up when Arthur entered, his attention fixed on cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife.
Help you? Just passing time.
Arthur leaned against the wall.
Heard there might be some trouble out by Emerald Ranch way. Homesteader named Vance having some problems with a neighbor.
Miller's eyes narrowed.
Silas Crofts, a respected businessman in these parts. Provides jobs, pays taxes.
He pointed his knife at Arthur.
Best folks don't meddle in what don't concern them. Just asking is all. Well, now you got your answer. Crofts got proper claims to that water. Widow's just being stubborn, causing trouble for honest folk.
Arthur tipped his hat and left. Outside, he paused to light a cigarette, watching the smoke curl into the air. The law wouldn't help Elara. No surprise there. But something cold and hard had settled in Arthur's chest at the confirmation. The well water smelled of death. Arthur pulled the rope, holding up the bucket to find a bloated, rotting rabbit floating in the murky liquid. Lara's face was ashen as she looked at it.
Thomas,
she called, her voice strained.
Stay inside.
Arthur dumped the bucket anger burning slow and hot in his gut.
I'll clean it out.
It took hours. By the time he finished, his clothes were soaked with sweat and fouled water. He tracked the culprits to the edge of the property before losing them in the rocky terrain. But he knew where they led. Back to Croft. When he returned, Ilara had food waiting. A simple stew, but hot and filling. Thomas sat across from him, wide-eyed and silent.
Why are you helping us?
The boy asked suddenly. Arthur looked up, caught off guard.
Thomas,
Ilara warned softly.
Oh, it's all right,
Arthur said. He studied the boy, seeing the fear behind the brave face.
Seems to me you and your mama could use a hand.
But why you? Because I've spent my life taking from people who had enough to spare, Arthur thought. And some who didn't. Because the line between me and men like Cain is thinner than I want to admit.
Just passing through,
he said instead. A few days later, he found Cain and one of his men blocking the road to the Van's property. Turning away a wagon loaded with seed and supplies. Roads closed, Cain was saying. Flood damage up ahead, unsafe. Arthur approached slowly, his spurs jingling with each step.
That's funny. Rode myself this way not an hour ago. Road seemed fine to me.
Cain's head snapped up. Recognition and hatred flashing across his face. You.
Me.
Arthur smiled.
Seems to me this gentleman has deliveries to make.
Seems to me you need a lesson in minding your own business. Cain nodded to his companion, who moved to flank Arthur.
All right, I'm giving you boys one chance to walk away.
Arthur's voice was soft, almost kind.
After that, it gets, uncivilized.
Cain drew first, or tried to. Arthur was faster, twisting the gun from his hand and following with a brutal uppercut. It sent the man sprawling. The second man rushed from behind Arthur ducked, spinning to drive his elbow into the attacker's stomach. Then his fist into the man's jaw. Bone cracked under his knuckles. Cain was up again, spitting blood, drawing a knife. He lunged, wild with fury. Arthur sidestepped, caught his wrist, and twisted until the knife fell from nerveless fingers. Then he drove his fist into Cain's face, until the man dropped to his knees, stunned. Arthur hauled him up by his collar. "Stay away from Mrs. Vance," he growled. "Next time I won't be so neighborly." He released Cain, who staggered back, clutching his broken nose. You're dead, mister," he gasped. "You don't know who you're messing with." Arthur watched them retreat, then turned to the wide-eyed deliveryman. "Mrs. Vance is expecting those supplies. I'd be obliged if you'd see they get to her." "Where have you been, Arthur?" Dutch's voice carried across the camp as Arthur dismounted. "Beginning to think you'd found better company." Arthur shrugged, wincing at the pain in his bruised ribs. "Just scouting, seeing what's out there." Mika snickered from his place by the fire. "Looks like what's out there fights back." Arthur ignored him, heading for his tent. Charles fell in step beside him, silent and watchful. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "Fine." Charles nodded, not pushing. But as he turned to go, he said, "Whatever it is, be careful. Things are tense. Dutch is watching." Arthur lay on his cot that night, staring at the canvas above him. The sounds of the camp, Javier's guitar, Sean's drunken laughter, Miss Grimshaw scolding someone, washed over him, familiar as his own heartbeat. But for the first time in years, it felt like noise. The storeroom at Emerald Ranch was poorly guarded. One man half asleep by the back door. Arthur slipped past him without a sound, picked the lock, and filled a sack with what Ilara needed. Feed for the chickens, medicine for the milk cow that had fallen ill, seeds for spring planting, just enough. Not so much the theft would cause an uproar, but enough to keep the Vance place running. He delivered the supplies under the cover of darkness. Ilara's gratitude a weight he didn't know how to carry. "Stay," she said, as he turned to go. "It's late, and I made stew." He should have refused. Should have mounted up and ridden back to camp, to the life he knew. Instead, he found himself at her table again, watching young Thomas demonstrate how to carve a small wooden horse. "Samuel used to do it better," the boy admitted, looking at his clumsy work. "But I'm still learning." "It's good," Arthur said, meaning it. "It's probably better than I could do." Later, when Thomas slept, Ilara sat across from Arthur, her face golden in the lamplight. "You're not just passing through, are you, Mr. Morgan?" Arthur looked down at his hands. Killer's hands. Thief's hands. "No, ma'am. I reckon I'm not." "What are you then?" The truth pressed against his teeth, wanting out. "I'm an outlaw. I ride with the Vanderling gang. I've killed men, robbed banks, terrorized towns. I'm no different from Cain, except maybe in who I choose to hurt." "Just someone who's seen too many crows get their way," he said instead. She studied him, her eyes too knowing. "Well, whatever you are, I'm glad you found us." Deputy Miller arrived at dawn. His horse lathered as if he'd ridden hard. Behind him came two more men, Crofts by their look. "Mrs. Vance," Miller called, dismounting. "I've got a report of stolen property. Anonymous tip says we might find it here." Arthur, who'd been repairing a loose board on the porch, straightened slowly. "Deputy?" Miller faltered. recognition flickering across his face. Morgan? What are you doing here?
Helping a friend. Arthur stepped down from the porch, positioning himself between Miller and Ilara, who had emerged from the house. Is there a problem with that?
I got a warrant to search these premises. Miller produced a folded paper, waving it like a flag. Stand aside, please.
Let me just check that. Arthur took the warrant,
unfolded it with deliberate care. As he'd suspected, it was vague, hastily written, probably not even legal. But Miller had the badge, and Croft's men had guns.
What exactly are you looking for, Deputy?
Ilara asked, her voice steady despite the fear Arthur could sense in her. Stolen goods, farm equipment, maybe some livestock. Miller nodded to his companions. Search the place.
Wait.
Arthur stepped forward.
You know this is Croft's doing. You know there's nothing stolen here.
Got a duty to investigate, Morgan, unless... Miller's eyes shifted meaningfully. Unless the widow's reconsidering Croft's offer.
Get off my land.
Ilara's voice was cold as river ice.
Now.
One of Croft's men emerged from the barn, dragging something. Found this, he called, holding up a branded bridle. Croft's mark, plain as day. Well, well, Miller smiled thinly. Looks like we have our thief.
That's not mine,
Ilara protested.
Someone planted it there.
A likely story, Miller gestured to his men. Mrs. Vance, you're under arrest for... The sound of Arthur's gun cocking froze everyone in place.
No,
he said quietly.
She's not.
You're interfering with the law, Morgan.
I'm preventing a frame-up.
Arthur's eyes were cold.
That bridle wasn't there yesterday. I bet my life it's not even really Croft's. Just something with his brand slapped on it.
You threatening an officer of the law? Miller's hand inched toward his own gun.
I'm stating facts. Now, you and your friends are going to get on your horses and ride away. Tell Croft if he wants this land, he'll have to come for it himself.
The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring.
Then Miller backed down, his face flushed with anger and fear.
This isn't over, he warned, mounting up. Croft won't stand for this.
I'm counting on it, Arthur replied. When they were gone, Lara turned to him, her face pale.
They'll be back with more men.
Yes. Arthur watched the dust settle on the road. Which is why we're gonna end this tonight.
Croft's ranch sprawled across prime grazing land, his main house standing proud on a rise overlooking his domain. Arthur studied it through his binoculars from a distant hilltop, noting the guards, the routines, the weaknesses. By nightfall, he had a plan. You don't have to do this, Lara said. She bandaged his hand. We could leave. Start somewhere new.
They'd just find you anyway, Arthur said. Men like Croft don't forget.
He looked at her, at the life she'd built.
Besides, this is your home.
She held his gaze. Be careful, Arthur. His name on her lips sounded like something he'd lost long ago. The night was moonless, perfect for what he had to do. Arthur moved like a shadow across Croft's property, disabling the guard dogs with drugged meat, slipping past the ranch hands sleeping in the bunkhouse. The main house was his target, specifically Croft's office, where Alara believed he kept the falsified documents he planned to use against her. The lock on the back door gave way easily. Arthur stepped inside, moving silently through the darkened house till he found what he sought. A large room filled with bookshelves, a massive desk dominating the center. He lit a small lantern, keeping the flame low, began searching. He found them in a locked drawer. Deeds, maps, letters detailing Croft's plan to dam the stream that ran through Alara's property, diverting the water to his own lands. Among them was a letter from Deputy Miller, promising his assistance in exchange for a cut of the profits. Evidence enough to ruin both men if placed in the right hands. Arthur was folding the papers into his satchel when the door opened. Well, well. Kane stood in the doorway, a shotgun aimed at Arthur's chest, his face still bruised from their last encounter. Mr. Croft said we might have a visitor tonight. Arthur straightened slowly, his hands visible. Just returning something that doesn't belong to your boss. Funny. I was about to say the same about that widow's land. Kane gestured with his shotgun. Move away from the desk. Hands where I can see them. Arthur complied, calculating distances, angles, chances. Not good. The shotgun would cut him in half at this range. Mr. Croft wants to talk to you, Kane said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Explain his position in person. I'll be obliged if you take me to him then. Kane laughed. Oh, he's coming. He's just getting dressed. Can't meet important visitors in a nightshirt, can he? He jerked the shotgun. Meantime, you and me got some unfinished business. Arthur saw it in his eyes. Kane wasn't planning to wait for Croft. He was going to shoot Arthur where he stood. Claim self-defense. Arthur tensed, ready to move. The floorboard creaked behind Kane an instant before a vase shattered against the back of his head. He staggered, the shotgun discharging into the ceiling as he fell. Arthur lunged, wrenching the weapon from his hands and bringing the butt down hard on Kane's temple. The man went limp. Elara stood in the doorway, her eyes wide, but hands steady. I couldn't let you do it alone, she said. Shouts erupted outside. The gunshot had alerted the ranch hands. Arthur grabbed the documents in Elara's hand. We need to move. Now. They ran, ducking through the house and out a side door. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets splintering wood near their heads. Arthur returned fire, precise shots that sent their pursuers diving for cover. They reached the trees where their horses waited, mounted, and galloped into the night. Behind them, Croft's voice rose above the chaos, promising rewards for their heads. found them on the porch of the Vans homestead. The stolen documents spread before them. "These will stop him," Laura said. "The circuit judge passes through Valentine next week. He's not in Croft's pocket. Not yet, anyway." Arthur nodded, wincing as she cleaned the bullet graze on his arm. "Best leave today. Take Thomas somewhere safe until this blows over." "And you?" "I'll stay too long already." His people would be looking for him. Dutch would have questions. And there was still the matter of that bank in Valentine that Dutch had been eyeing. Thomas appeared in the doorway, clutching something small in his little hands. "Mr. Morgan?" He approached shyly, holding out a wooden carving. "I made it for you." It was a horse. Crude, simple, but recognizable. Arthur took it carefully. "Thank you, Thomas." "Will you come back?" the boy asked. "After we see the judge?" Arthur looked at Alara, saw the same question in her eyes. "I don't know," he answered, honestly. "I hope so." The sun was high as Arthur mounted his horse for the last time that day. Alara stood on the porch, Thomas at her side watching him prepare to leave. "Arthur," she said, coming down to stand beside his horse. "Whatever happens, thank you for everything." He looked down at her, memorizing her face, knowing it would join the gallery of might-have-beens he carried within him. "You take care," he said. She reached up, her hand warm against his, where it rested on the saddle horn. "You too, Arthur Morgan." He rode away without looking back, the wooden horse heavy in his pocket. The homestead dwindled behind him, becoming a memory even before he'd lost sight of it. The camp was alive with activity when he returned. Dutch holding court by fire, Hosea and Bill arguing over a map, Sean serenading Karen with an off-key ballad. No one noticed Arthur slip in, tend to his horse, retreat to his tent. He took out his journal, opened it to a fresh page. The wooden horse sat beside him as he began to write. the pencil scratching softly in the darkness.
Helped a widow stand against the land baron today. The kind of simple evil we pretend to fight, but mostly just mirror. For a moment I was the man Dutch claims we all are. Defender of the weak, enemy of tyranny. Felt clear. Right even. But I'm riding with him tomorrow to case that bank in Valentine. And I know it ain't the same. Can't pretend it is. Still, for a few days I remember what it was to be something other than Dutch's gun or the law's target. To be a man helping another soul. It ain't redemption. Ain't even close. But it was something true in a life built on lies. Maybe that's all any of us can hope for in the end. A few moments of truth before the darkness claims us.
He closed the journal, leaned back on his cot, and stared into the night sky visible through the canvas above him. Somewhere out there, Lara and Thomas were preparing to fight for their home. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Arthur Morgan dared to hope that good people might actually win. The snow fell like ash from a dying fire, coating Arthur Morgan's shoulder as he crouched beside Charles in the lee of a frost-rimmed boulder. Their breath clouded in the bitter mountain air, while ahead of them, a young buck picked its way through the knee-deep drifts. Dutch ain't been right since Blackwater, Charles murmured. Getting reckless. Desperate. Arthur's fingers tightened on his rifle. Whole world's getting desperate, seems like. He nodded. A distant column of black smoke rising above the tree line. Another logging camp. Weren't nothing but wilderness here last winter. The buck's head snapped up, nostrils flaring. Before either man could shoot, a train whistle echoed through the valley, sending the deer bounding into the undergrowth. Arthur cursed, lowering his rifle as Charles stood, snow cascading from his shoulders. Civilization's closing in, Charles said, and Dutch keeps pushing us further into its jaws. Later, by lantern light, Arthur scratched in his journal. The walls keep closing in. Dutch talks about freedom, but I'm starting to wonder if there's anywhere left to be free. The camp's atmosphere was thick as storm clouds when they returned, with only a few rabbits to show for their hunt. Dutch held court by the main fire. We are on the cusp, my friends. One more big score, and we'll have enough to disappear. To be free. Hosea sat quietly, stirring his stew with downcast eyes. Across the fire, John Marston hunched his shoulders against Micah's barbed words. Look who finally remembered where home is. Micah sneered. Thought maybe you'd run off permanent like this time, Marston. Shut your mouth, Micah, John growled. But there was uncertainty in his voice that hadn't been there before his year-long absence. Dutch either didn't notice the tension or chose to ignore it, lost in his grand visions. The future is ours to grasp. We just need faith. Later, as the camp settled into uneasy sleep, Hosea drew Arthur aside. They stood by a dying fire. I've known Dutch for 20 years, Hosea said, watching the embers fade. Never seen him like this. That business in Blackwater changed something in him. Or maybe he paused, glancing towards Micah's tent. Maybe it just brought something out that was already there. Arthur shifted uncomfortably. We've had bad runs before. Not like this. Hosea's eyes reflected the fire's dying light. We are walking in dangerous path, Arthur. I fear Micah's leading Dutch further down it. He gripped Arthur's shoulder. Keep your eyes open, son. Storm's coming. I'm not sure all of us are going to weather it. Arthur watched the old conman shuffle away through the snow, leaving him alone with thoughts as dark as the gathering light. In the distance, another train whistle echoed off the mountains, like a wolf howling at the moon. The Saint Denis saloon reeked of stale beer and broken dreams. Arthur Morgan nursed his whiskey, while Jackson Wheeler, an old contact with newer wrinkles and shakier hands, leaned in close. Hammond Mining's sitting on more gold than God, Wheeler whispered. Security's tight. Word is they're pushing out so fast, they can't watch everything. Arthur's attention drifted to a group of well-dressed men at a corner table. their laughter cutting through the smoky air. One of them grabbed a passing barmaid, yanking her close. "Another round, and tell your people to be quicker about it." "Hammond's boys," Wheeler explained. "Think they own everything 'cause they bought the mountain." The barmaid pulled away again, but the executive grabbed her one last time. Arthur set his glass down hard enough to draw attention. "The lady said no." What followed was brief but brutal. Arthur left two mining executives nursing broken noses, while Wheeler slipped away in the chaos. As Arthur stepped over the groaning bodies toward the door, he caught sight of a lawman's badge glinting in the lamplight. One of three watching from the bar without intervening. "Mighty fine evening, gentlemen." Arthur tipped his hat as he passed. The badge holders just smiled, patting their pockets where Arthur guessed Hammond's money rested. The next morning, Arthur and Charles crouched in the underbush above Hammond's main operation. The valley below swarmed with activity. Native workers struggling under heavy loads, while overseers shouted and cracked whips. "This is wrong," Charles growled. "Those are Wapiti men down there. The reservation boundary used to be here before Hammond's lawyers redrew the maps." Arthur tracked the patrol's movement through his binoculars. 4 guard towers, Gatling gun on the north bridge. Must be 20 armed men that I can see. "And those men down there?" Charles nodded toward the native workers. "What happens to them when Dutch's plan goes wrong? Because it will go wrong, Arthur. It always does these days." A worker stumbled below them, dropping his load. The crack of a whip echoed up through the valley. Charles's hand tightened on his bow. "We don't have to do this," he said. "We could leave, find somewhere the world hasn't corrupted yet." Arthur lowered his binoculars. "Ain't sure such a place exists anymore, friend." Dutch's eyes blazed in the campfire light as Arthur laid out the details of Hammond's operation. The gang leader paced, his shadow dancing against the canvas of his tent like a restless spirit. "Don't you see?" Dutch's voice rose with familiar passion. "This isn't just about gold. It's justice. These corporate vultures stealing from honest folk, from the natives. We'd be doing God's work, We'd be doing suicide is what we'd be doing. Hosea's weathered face was grave in the flickering light. 20 armed guards, Arthur said, Gatling guns. This isn't some stagecoach hold-up, Dutch. The bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. Micah lounged against a tent pole, cleaning his nails with a knife. Ain't that what you always taught us, Dutch? Besides, way I see it, we hit 'em hard and fast. They won't know what hit 'em. I'll do it. John Marston stepped forward, his scars stark in the firelight. I can scout the North Ridge, maybe find us a way in through the mine shaft. Dutch's hand fell on John's shoulder, squeezing. That's the spirit, son. This is how we rebuild trust. Through action. Hosea caught Arthur's eye, a silent warning passing between them. But Dutch was already lost in his plans. His voice rising with evangelical fervor. Outside the tent, life in the camp continued its ragged rhythm. Arthur found himself pausing near John and Abigail's wagon, where raised voices carried on the evening air. You trying to get yourself killed? Abigail's whisper was fierce. Taking crazy risks just to prove yourself to Dutch. I'm trying to provide for my family, John shot back. Or ain't that what you've been asking me to do? I've been asking you to be here for your son, to be alive for him. At a nearby table, Jack sat hunched over a piece of paper, carefully drawing with a stubby pencil. Arthur glanced over the boy's shoulder. Stick figures around a campfire, one tall with a mustache, another with a long coat like Dutch's. Family's all we got in the end. Miss Grimshaw appeared beside Abigail. Her usual stern expression softened. Menfolk, they just take longer to figure that out. Some never do. Arthur touched the photo in his satchel, the one he never showed anyone. A woman and child, faces faded with time. He'd chosen the gang over them once upon a time. Dutch's silver tongue painting pictures of glory and freedom. Now, here was John, walking the same path, while his living, breathing family begged him to choose differently.
a thing, Arthur murmured. To watch a man make the same mistake you did. Not to be able to stop him. The Blackwater Grand Hotel saloon made Arthur's skin crawl. Crystal chandeliers caught lamplight like precious tears, while men in tailored suits discussed the price of others' labor over brandy. Dutch sat at a corner table, resplendent in a new black coat, playing the role of business magnate with practiced ease. Beside him, Micah preened like a cat in cream. That's him, Hosea muttered from their shadowed table across the room. Jefferson Burke. Notice how his smile never reaches his eyes. Arthur studied their supposed new ally as he approached Dutch's table. Burke moved like a rattlesnake in a waistcoat, all fluid grace hiding deadly intent. His handshake with Dutch lasted too long, his laugh too practiced. Micah's friend gives me the same feeling as a noose around my neck, Arthur growled. Dutch sees what he wants to see these days. Hosea's voice carried 2 decades of weary loyalty. And what he wants to see is someone promising him everything he's ever dreamed of. They watched Burke sketch something on a napkin. A map. Dutch's eyes lit with that familiar fire, while Micah's hand stayed suspiciously close to his gun beneath the table. Our friend, Mr. Burke, Hosea mused, has the look of a man holding aces and claiming they're kings. Two days later, Arthur and John belly crawled through wet grass behind Hammond's storage sheds. The moon cast just enough light to move by, while rain muffled their approach. Like old times, John whispered. Remember that horse ranch in '95? Remember you falling in the pig pen and nearly getting us shot? They shared a quiet laugh. For a moment, it was like the years of distance between them melted away. Then John sobered. Arthur, about what happened when I left. Water under the bridge, brother. Arthur clasped his shoulder. Just glad that you found your way back. Their moment was interrupted by voices. Burke emerged from a side door, speaking in hushed tones with a man in a familiar black suit.
Hammond's head of security. "Goddamn rat," John hissed. "He's playing both sides." They watched Burke pass something to the security chief. Papers that gleamed with official letterhead in the moonlight. "Dutch needs to know," John said as they made their retreat. Arthur thought of Dutch's blazing eyes in the saloon, of how he dismissed Hosea's concerns about Burke with a wave of his hand. "Dutch ain't been much for listening lately." "Then what do we do?" Rain dripped from Arthur's brim as he considered their dwindling options. "We keep our eyes open. We watch each other's backs. Storm's coming, John. Best be ready when it breaks." "Burke is working with Hammond Security." Arthur's words echoed through Dutch's tent. But they might as well have been whispers in a storm, for all the impact they made. Dutch didn't even look up from his book. "Burke understands, as I do, that sometimes we must wear masks to achieve our goals. This ain't about masks, Dutch. This is about your lack of faith." Dutch's voice carried a new edge, one that made Arthur's neck hair rise. "About how you and Hosea seem determined to question every move I make these days." As if summoned, Hosea threw back the tent flap. "Maybe we question because we remember what this gang used to stand for. We stood for freedom." Dutch slammed his book shut. "For fighting against a corrupt system. We stood for helping people," Hosea countered. "When did we start caring more about the score than the cost?" Outside, Arthur could see the gang gathering, drawn by the raised voices. Bill and Javier moved closer to Dutch's tent, while Charles and Mary Beth drifted toward Hosea. Micah circled the edges like a wolf scenting weakness. "You're either with us," Dutch declared, "or you're against us. There's no middle ground in a war. And make no mistake, this is a war." "The only war," Micah drawled, "is the one some folks are waging against your leadership, Dutch." The moon was a thin slice above them as Arthur, Hosea, and John met in in the shelter of an old oak, far enough away from camp that even Micah's prying eyes couldn't reach. "Dutch ain't gonna listen," Arthur said. "Not to any of us." "Then we need a plan," Hosea said. "When, not if, this goes wrong. We need to be ready to get people out." "Mary Beth and Tilly will come with us," John added. "Maybe Karen if she's sober enough to see sense." Charles materialized from the darkness, like a shadow taking form. "Pinkertons," he said without preamble. 24 at least, moving into position around Blackwater. They're getting ready for something big. Arthur leaned against the oak's rough bark, feeling as old as its rings. Later, by candlelight, he opened his journal. Loyalty. That's what Dutch preaches. What he demands. But what happens when loyalty to one man means betraying everything he taught you? Everything you believed in. Dutch says fate will see us through, but my faith's wearing thin. Maybe true loyalty ain't about following blindly. Maybe it's about remembering who someone used to be and being brave enough to tell them when they've lost their way. Even if it costs you everything. Storm clouds are gathering. I can feel it in my bones. And I fear by the time it breaks, there won't be anything left of the family we once were. The explosion at Hammond's South Gate should have been their signal to move. Instead, it became their epitaph. Arthur watched Dutch's perfect plan unravel like a cheap sweater. Burke's intelligence had been wrong, or deliberately false. Instead of a skeleton security, they faced an army. Instead of surprise, they found ambush. "This ain't right," Arthur shouted over gunfire to Charles. "The guard patterns are all wrong." Native workers fled. A screaming bullet splintered wooden supports. A young Wapiti man fell, clutching his chest. He couldn't have been more than 16. "Get them out," Arthur yelled to Charles, who was already moving, shepherding terrified workers to safety. Arthur turned to provide covering fire and found himself staring down the barrel of a Gatling gun. Time slowed. Arthur saw the flash, heard the mechanical thunder, felt the certainty of death. And then, something slammed into him from the side. He and John rolled behind a coal cart as bullets chewed the ground where he'd stood. Like that pig pen in '95, John grinned through the gun smoke. Always gotta save your sorry hide. A worker's scream cut through their moment. Dutch was shoving past fleeing natives, fixated on the office building. The safe. We can still get to the safe. Dutch. Arthur's voice was lost in the chaos. Another explosion rocked the site. This one unplanned, and flames began consuming the dry timber supports. Fall back, Hosea's voice carried over the mayhem. Everyone fall back. John and Arthur worked in wordless synchronization, covering each other's retreat as the mining operation collapsed into hell behind them. Back at camp, the air was thick with blame and gun smoke. If you'd all stuck to the plan, Dutch paced like a caged tiger. The plan? Hosea's laugh was bitter as creek water. The plan got 3 innocent workers killed. Casualties of war, old friend. Dutch's voice carried that strange new tone. The one that made him sound more like a preacher than a thief. You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. They weren't eggs, Dutch. Arthur's quiet words cut through the tension. They were people. Working folk. The kind we used to protect. Used to. Dutch rounded on him. Used to. Since when did you become such a philosopher, Arthur? Such a moralist. Standing there judging me after everything I've done for you. The gang gathered around the confrontation. Bill fingered his gun nervously. Xavier looked between Dutch and Hosea, like a child watching his parents fight. Karen clutched a bottle like a lifeline. Maybe. Micah's voice oiled through the tension. The problem is we're still playing by old rules. World's changing, Dutch. Time we changed with it. Next time we go in hard. No witnesses. No problems. Next time. Hosea's voice cracked like a whip. Those were boys in there, Dutch. Sons and brothers. When did we become the thing we used to fight against? When we decided to survive Dutch roared. The veins in his neck stood out like ropes. The world is trying to kill us, and you want to worry about conscience, about morality. Look around you, there is no morality. There is only survival. In the silence that followed, Arthur watched something break in Hosea's eyes. The old conman turned away, shoulders bowed under the weight of lost faith. The gang drifted apart like scattered crows, leaving Dutch alone by the fire with his demons. And Micah, ever present, whispering in his ear. The letter trembled in Arthur's hands as he read it by lamplight in Burke's abandoned hotel room. Official Pinkerton letterhead, signed by Agent Milton himself. Mr. Burke, your cooperation in the Vanderlyn matter has been noted. Proceed with the plan. Draw them to Blackwater. The agency will handle the rest. Payment to be rendered upon delivery. Across town, John stood in the shadows of Hammond's office, holding a telegraph that made his blood run cold. Burke, stop. Gang taking bait, stop. Full force ready in Blackwater, stop. Terminate with extreme prejudice, stop. Two men, two messages, one terrible truth. Their horses' hoofs thundered through the night, racing back to camp from opposite directions. Arthur's thoughts roared louder than the wind in his ears. All those signs they'd ignored, all Dutch's strange decisions. Burke had been playing them from the start. When they burst into camp, they found Dutch already holding court. Tomorrow, his voice rang. Tomorrow we take everything. The main office, the gold shipments, all of it. Dutch. Arthur fought to catch his breath. Burke's been working with. Burke has provided us with everything we need. Dutch's eyes blazed with dangerous light. Time for doubt is over. It's a trap. John stepped forward. Telegraph clutched in his fist. The Pinkertons. Enough. Dutch's voice roared in the silence. I see what this is. More sabotage from those who lack faith, who'd rather crawl on their bellies than stand and fight. Hosea emerged from the shadows. Listen to them, Dutch. For once, just listen. No. Dutch's voice dropped to something terrible and quiet. You listen. Tomorrow we go to Blackwater. Anyone who stands with me will be rewarded beyond their dreams. Anyone who doesn't. His hand drifted to his holster. The gang began taking sides. Bill, Xavier, and Karen moved behind Dutch. Charles, Mary Beth, and Tilly drifted towards Hosea. Others stood frozen, torn between loyalty and survival. Dutch. Arthur's voice cracked as he made one final attempt. Dutch, this ain't you. The Dutch I knew wouldn't sacrifice his family for gold. The Dutch you knew. A terrible smile crossed Dutch's face. The Dutch you knew was a fool who thought he could change the world with words and honor. Tomorrow we show him what we've become. Tomorrow we take what's ours. Even if it means killing innocent folk, Hosea asked. Even if it means killing anyone who stands in our way. Dutch turned his back, Micah smirking at his shoulder. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we write our names in history. Arthur watched his mentor walk away and knew with cold certainty that the Dutch van der Linde they'd followed all these years had finally vanished into the gathering dark. The trap closed like a steel jaw. Pinkertons emerged from every shadow of Hammond's main office. Rifles gleaming in the dawn light. Burke stood on the balcony, watching with a businessman's satisfaction as the gang walked into his web. The first volley cut Sean down mid-choke. The young Irishman collapsed, his laugh still echoing in the morning air. Sean's hit. Arthur scrambled toward the fallen man, bullets kicking up dust around him. Leave him. Dutch's order cracked like a whip. Everyone save yourselves. But Arthur was already moving, John appearing at his side as if summoned. Together, they dragged Sean behind a wagon. Arthur's hands slick with the boy's blood as he pressed a bandage against the wound. What's the plan, Dutch? Micah's voice carried over the gunfire, mocking. What about all that faith? Dutch was already mounting the Count, his white horse, a beacon in the chaos. For a moment, his eyes met Arthur's across the battlefield. And there was something there that Arthur had never seen before. Something cold, empty. Dutch spurred his horse and was gone, leaving his sons to the slaughter. They rode hard through the dawn, the thunder of pursuit mixing with the thunder in their hearts. Sean bounced delirious in front of Arthur, kept from falling only by Arthur's iron grip. Black water, Dutch's voice carried back to them. We can lose them in the crowds. Hosea rode beside Arthur, his face gray with more than exhaustion. He's leading us into a dead end. Got no choice now, Arthur grunted, feeling Sean's blood seeping into his shirt. Can't outrun them in the open. They thundered past a sign marking Blackwater's outskirts. Arthur saw lawmen moving into position on the rooftops, saw civilians scurrying for cover like they knew what was coming. Ahead, Dutch rode like a madman possessed, Micah cackling at his side like some demented herald. John, Arthur called over the wind. Whatever happens in there. I know, brother. John's eyes were hard beneath his hat brim. We save who we can. The gates of Blackwater loomed before them like the gates of hell itself. And Arthur knew with cold certainty that not all of them would be riding out again. Later, night found them in the hills above Blackwater, the town's lights twinkling below like fallen stars. Arthur and John sat apart from the others, sharing a bottle and the weight of tomorrow. Abigail asked me to run, John said quietly, watching Jack sleep by a distant campfire. Take them south, maybe to Mexico. Arthur studied his face in the moonlight, seeing the boy he'd once saved from hanging overlaid, the man who'd saved him at Hammond's. Maybe she ain't wrong. Could say the same to you. You got money saved. Could ride out tonight. Yeah, and leave the rest to Dutch's mercy. Arthur took a long pull from the bottle. Hosea, Mary Beth, Sean still bleeding in that wagon. Loyalty's gonna get you killed one day, Arthur Morgan. Yeah, probably. Arthur managed a grim smile. But at least I'll know who I was when it happens. They sat in companionable silence, each man wrestling with choices that had no right answers. Finally, John spoke again. If it all goes wrong, if I don't make it, I'll look after them, Arthur said simply. You know I will. Dutch's voice carried across the camp like thunder before a storm. Tomorrow, my friends, tomorrow we take what destiny has promised us. Arthur sat in his tent, writing by lantern light, as Dutch's grand promises washed over him. The gang gathered around their leader like moths to flame, desperate to believe that faith alone could save them. Arthur wrote, found something interesting in Burke's papers. Talk of a fairy job. Dutch is fixated on it now, seeing gold where I see graves. Tomorrow we ride back into Blackwater, and I fear some of us ride to our doom. Hosea says a man's character is revealed not in how he acts when times are good, but in what he'll sacrifice when times are hard. Dutch taught me that loyalty matters more than life itself. Now I'm watching him sacrifice everything once held dear on the altar of his own glory. If you're reading this, and I ain't around to explain myself, know that I tried. I tried to save them all. But maybe some things, some people, they just can't be saved. Storm's breaking. God help us all. Arthur closed his journal and looked over the camp. In the distance, Blackwater waited, patient as a hangman's noose. The moon hung full and heavy over camp, like an eye watching judgment unfold. Arthur's pen scratched against paper, each word a weight lifted and added to his shoulders at the same time. Watch Dutch talking to himself by the fire tonight, arguing with ghosts only he can see. Man who raised me, taught me everything I know about loyalty, family. Feels like a stranger wearing familiar skin. Keeps talking about one last score, one big play that'll solve everything. Starting to think maybe there ain't no solving what's broken in us. He paused, looking up as John crossed the camp to where Abigail sat mending clothes. Jack slept in her lap, peaceful despite the tension hanging over them all. John knelt, touching his son's hair with gentleness. Abigail's hand found his shoulder, and for just a moment They were everything the gang had once pretended to be. A real family bound by love instead of desperation. Funny thing about loyalty, Arthur continued writing, is like a river. Carves deeper channels the longer it runs. But rivers can change course, given enough time and pressure. Maybe that's what's happening to all of us. Maybe loyalty to what's right has to run deeper than loyalty to any one man. Got a feeling my own river's running out. Can feel it in my bones. Same way I feel storms coming. Just hope when my time comes, it means something. Hope maybe I can leave things a little better than I found them. Give someone else a chance at something real. John's got his family. Got something worth fighting for. Worth dying for. Maybe that's the real price of loyalty. Knowing when to let go of what you love, so it has a chance to survive. Arthur closed his journal and watched the stars wheel overhead. Each one a dream of redemption, just out of reach. The river winding past the camp caught the day's last light, turning water to liquid copper. Arthur Morgan's pen scratched against paper as the gang's evening sounds drifted around him. Pearson's ladle scraping the stew pot bottom, Miss Grimshaw directing the girls about their chores, Bill and Micah arguing over a game of dominoes. Feels like we're all holding our breath lately. Dutch chose this spot to lie low. But there's something in the air. Same feeling you get when wolves are watching, waiting. Only this time, can't shake the sense we're the ones being hunted. Dutch's voice carried from his tent. Another speech about faith and patience, wrapped in silver words. But for the first time in 20 years, Arthur heard something beneath the shine. Something hollow, like wind through empty rooms. Contemplating the mysteries of the universe, Hosea settled beside Arthur, joints creaking like old leather. Just thinking. Dangerous habit. Hosea's eyes drifted to where Dutch paced, gesturing at his captive audience. Been doing some of that myself lately. Arthur closed his journal.
Hosea, you ever get the feeling that we're running out of road? Hosea chimed in. His smile carried more warning than warmth. Might be a time to consider a different path. One that leads somewhere besides deeper into trouble. What do you got in mind? But Hosea had already risen, leaving Arthur alone with the dying light, the weight of unspoken words. Dawn painted the eastern sky bloody as Arthur rode out, hoofbeats echoing off canyon walls. The morning mist clung to the valley floor, thick as river mud. His breath clouded in the chill air, thoughts turning over like stones in a stream. Movement ahead caught his eye. A wagon, materializing through the fog like a shipwreck rising from the depths. The canvas cover hung in tatters, patches sewn with whatever thread came to hand. The mule pulling it looked as worn as its master, a grey beard with eyes sharp as broken glass beneath his battered hat. "Morning, friend," the peddler called. "Don't see many folk on this road these days. Not since the trouble started." Arthur drew alongside, noting how the old man's hand never strayed far from his belt. "What trouble's that?" "Little settlement called Dryfield, 2 days west." The peddler spat, tobacco juice dark against the pale dust. "Band of devils moved in last month, taking everything they ain't nailed down. Food, livestock, people too. No law out there worth speaking of." "People?" Something cold settled in Arthur's gut. "Yeah, people. Workers for their mind, they say. Though ain't no one who goes in ever comes back out." The old man's eyes carried shadows deeper than the morning gloom. "Good folks out there, struggling to hold on to what's theirs. They could use someone willing to stand between them and the devils." "Yeah, seems like the law's job." The peddler's laugh was bitter as creek water. "Law's been bought and paid for, same as everything else. Man wants to do right by them people. He'd have to do it knowing he stands alone." Arthur touched his spurs to his horse. Decision
already made. Behind him, the peddler's wagon creaked into motion, swallowed by a fog like it had never been. But Dryfield's troubles rode with him now, and Arthur Morgan had never been one to turn from a cry for help, even when wisdom suggested he should. Night had settled over camp when Arthur returned. Dutch paced outside his tent, eyes focused, muttering about plans and patience and faith. Folk getting terrorized out near Dryfield, Arthur said, cutting to the heart. Marauders, taking whatever they want. Taking people too. Dutch barely looked up. We've got enough problems without. I'll ride with him. Sadie Adler's voice cut through the dark, sharp as her knife. She emerged from the shadows, already armed for trouble. Count me in too. Javier approached the fire, rifle slung across his back. Been too long since we did something worth doing. Dutch's expression hardened. This isn't time for heroics, Arthur. We need to lie low. Just scouting, Dutch, Arthur said. Nothing more. The night passed in quiet preparation. Hosea appeared with maps and information whispered from passing travelers. Charles offered extra ammunition and advice about the western trails. Even John lingered nearby, something like regret in his scarred face. First light found them mounted up, breath frosting in the dawn air. Sadie checked her pistols, while Javier adjusted the rifle sights one final time. Dutch emerged from his tent, offering words that fell flat, more like warning than blessing. Don't bring trouble back to us, Arthur. You understand? We've got enough of our own. They rode out as the sun breached the horizon. 3 shadows against the gathering day. Behind them, camp stirred to life, unaware that everything was about to change. Smoke rose from Dryfield in thin grey streamers, like fingers reaching for help. The settlement sprawled across a shallow valley, hills rising around it like prison walls. What had once been a proper town now looked half abandoned. Porches sagged, windows gaped with broken teeth, bullet holes peppered the general store's weathered boards. Place looks worse than Hanging Dog Ranch, Sadie muttered, scanning the roof lines for movement. A woman clutched her child close as they passed, ducking into a doorway. An old man rocked on his porch, shotgun across his knees, eyes hard beneath his battered hat. The livery stable's doors hung crooked on broken hinges, inside empty except for bloodstains on straw. Never thought I'd see Dryfield like this. A woman's voice cut through the morning quiet. She stood in the street ahead of them, rifle held like she knew how to use it. Dark hair streaked with grey, dress clean but mended. My father built half of these buildings. Now look at them. Arthur dismounted slowly, hands clear of his guns. Are you Naomi Burke? Depends on who's asking. Arthur Morgan. This here's Sadie, Javier. Heard you might need some help. Naomi's laugh held no humor. Hell, needed that a month ago, when Keller and his boys first rode in. Needed it when they started taking our livestock, our supplies. She gestured at a burned-out house, walls black against the morning sky. Thompson family lived there, refused to pay protection money. And now, well, now they're gone. Gone where? Javier asked, though his tone said he knew. The mine. Naomi spat the word out. Keller calls it labor recruitment. Take our men, our women too if they're strong enough. Work them until... She trailed off, shoulders tight. Nobody comes back. How many of these bastards we talking about? Sadie's hand never strayed far from her gun. 30, maybe more. Ex-military, some of them. Mean as snakes, and twice as quick. Naomi met each of their eyes in turn. Marshall's been bought. Governor won't send help. Pinkertons turn a blind eye. Arthur studied the town's broken bones, the fear in its people's eyes. Why are you still fighting? because it's ours. Naomi's voice could have scratched stone. And if we don't stop 'em here, ain't no telling where they'll stop. So you tell me, Mr. Morgan, you just passing through, or you aim to help? Sadie's horse threw up dust as she rode into camp, the moon hanging low and yellow as a wolf's eye. Dutch's tent stood dark, but lamplight spilled from where Hosea sat reading, waiting. Thought you might be back, he said, marking his place. Seen that look in Arthur's eyes before. Town's half dead, Sadie said, dismounting. Other half's dying slow. Arthur needs more guns. John emerged from the shadows, cigarette ember glowing. How many? 30 men, ex-military, running forced labor, taking whole families. She met his eyes. Children, too. His fingers brushed the scars on his face, remembering his own years of absence. Jack's age. Some of them. Amen. Count me too. Charles materialized beside the scout fire, bow already stung across his back. Seen too many towns broken by men like that. Bill looked up from cleaning his rifle. Way I see it, we owe Dutch's way of thinking. Protecting folk who can't protect themselves. He chambered around. Besides, been too damn quiet lately. They gathered around Hosea's table. The old conman spreading out a map, worn as soft as cloth. Charles marked approaches in charcoal, while Bill argued for hitting them at dawn. John traced escape routes with a dirty finger. Mining town, you said? Hosea tapped a spot on the map. Might be old tunnels. Could be useful. Or a death trap, Bill growled. Everything's a death trap these days, Hosea said softly. Question is, whether it's worth dying for. Silence settled. Each face held different reasons. John thinking of Jack. Charles remembering his people's suffering. Bill hungry for purpose beyond mere survival. Sadie's hand rested on her gun, vengeance burning in her eyes. Dawn then, Hosea said finally. I'll keep Dutch occupied. You all do what needs doing. They prepared in silence, checking weapons and saddles. Some things didn't need saying. A shadow detached itself from Dryfield's ruins as they approached. Man moved like a hunter, rifle held easy but ready. Silas Green, he introduced himself, eyes measuring each of them in turn. Heard tell you might be willing to help. Might be, Arthur said. What's your stake in this? My boys, Green's voice cracked. Took them 2 weeks ago. Mining crew, Keller called it. I ain't heard a word since. They gathered in what remained of the saloon. Broken bottles crunched underfoot. Chair legs splintered like bones. A map lay spread across the bar. Corners weighted with bullet casings. Main entrance here, Green traced the path. Guard towers posted high. But there's another way. Old shaft from when my daddy worked these hills. I believe it leads right into their operation. John studied the map. Could work. Split their attention. One group here, Charles pointed, draw their eyes, while the others, while we get our people out. Sadie finished. Green nodded toward the window. Townsfolk moved with purpose now. Hope kindling in their eyes. A woman loaded spare ammunition into canvas bags. Another wrapped bread and dried meat in oilcloth. An old man led fresh horses from a hidden corral. Whole town's been waiting, Green said, gathering what we could. Weapons, supplies, information about guard changes. Bill snorted. A lot of faith in folk you just met. No, it ain't about faith. Green's eyes hardened. It's about having nothing left to lose. Arthur watched his people spread through town. Charles discussing sight lines with local hunters. Sadie plotting approaches with women who knew every shadow. John stood apart, something haunted in his expression. Thinking of running? Arthur asked quietly. No. Thinking of Jack, John answered. Jack and what kind of world he'll inherit if good folk keep looking away. The mine's black mouth gaped against the mountainside. Arthur and Charles lay belly down in the scrub, watching guards pace their rounds. Moonlight caught on rifle barrels, uniform buttons. Military training, Charles whispered. See how they sweep the grounds? A whip cracked. Figures shuffled from a side tunnel, chains rattling in the dark. Workers, shoulders bowed, faces gaunt. Behind them, a guard drove a rifle butt into a stumbling man's back. Jesus, Arthur breathed. Must be 30 people down there. They crept closer, using shadows like old friends. The night wind carried voices, the clank of machinery, screams that ended too quickly. A guard passed close enough to smell tobacco in his breath. Inside the main tunnel, ore carts stood abandoned. Charles touched Arthur's arm, pointing. Bodies lay half covered by canvas, ready for disposal. One hand stretched from beneath the shroud, a child's hand. Bootsteps approached. They pressed against the tunnel wall as lamplight swung past. 2 guards walked by, laughing about something. Keller wants another dozen by week's end. Plenty more farms to raid. Arthur's hand tightened on his gun, but Charles shook his head. Not yet. Not here. They made it back to town as full stun painted the sky grey. What they'd seen burned behind their eyes. Hit them at noon, Bill argued, fist striking the table. When the sun's highest. And kill how many workers in the crossfire? Sadie shot back. We need to get our people out first. The tunnel route, Charles began, is suicide, John cut in. One guard sees us, they'll collapse it with everyone inside. The debate raged, voices rising. Green watched silently, hope warring with fear in his eyes. Outside, parents held children close, watching the saloon like it held their last chance. Arthur stood. We do this right, he said. Not fast, not flashy. Charles, John, you take the old tunnel. Get those people out. Sadie, Bill, we give them something real pretty to look at up top. We met each gaze in turn,
This ain't about revenge. It's about saving lives. Night settled over Dryfield. They checked weapons, memorized routes, spoke quiet words that might be their last. Gunfire shattered the dawn quiet. Smoke rose from the Peterson farm, black against the pale sky. By the time Arthur's group arrived, the raiders were gone, leaving ruin in their wake. The farmhouse door hung off its hinges. Sarah Peterson knelt in the yard, cradling her husband's head. Blood soaked the front of her dress. "Try to stop him," she said as Sadie helped her up. They just kept hitting him. Inside, drawers lay dumped, furniture splintered. Bill found the children hiding in the root cellar, wide-eyed and silent. Charles tracked boot prints in the mud, military issue leading back toward the mine. Keller's warning, Green spat, watching John and Charles load the Petersons' belongings into a wagon, showing us what happens to folk who help outsiders. The town took the family in. Women brought clothes, men offered spare blankets. Arthur watched Sadie sit with Sarah Peterson, speaking soft words he couldn't quite hear. Bill surprised him, producing a wooden horse from somewhere, offering it to the youngest Peterson boy. "My pa made me one before." Bill trailed off, uncomfortable with kindness. Night found Arthur alone by the church, smoke from his cigarette rising like a ghost. The Peterson farm still burned on the horizon, a wound in the dark. Having doubts, Charles appeared beside him, quiet as always. "Thinking about Dutch," Arthur admitted. "What he'd say about all this. Time was, helping folk like the Petersons was what we stood for. Yeah, maybe that's why we're here. To remember who we were." Arthur studied the burning farmhouse, then the town behind them. Lights burned in the windows, people moving together with purpose. Sarah Peterson's children slept safe in borrowed beds. "Ain't about remembering," Arthur said finally, dropping his cigarette, grinding it out. "It's about choosing who we want to be,
dynamite shattered the morning stillness. John and Bill's horses thundered past the mine entrance, kicking up chaos in their wake. Guards scattered as explosions walked across the compound. "Come on out, you bastards." Bill's voice boomed through gunsmoke. "Got something special for you." Another blast sent the guard tower creaking. Men poured from the barracks, rifles glinting. John's repeater sang out, dropping two before they reached for cover. More explosions. Carefully placed charges, turning the mine's entrance into hell. "Think we got their attention," John called over the din. Bill's answer came in lead, picking up a guard trying to reach the Gatling gun. "Reckon so." Guards scrambled like ants from a broken hill. Somewhere inside, a bell rang a desperate warning. Boots thundered on wooden walkways as reinforcements rushed towards the sound of gunfire. Just as planned. A rider spurred toward town. Bill's shot took the horse clean out, sending its rider sprawling. The morning dissolved into thunder and smoke, all eyes drawn to the flame-lit chaos at the mine's mouth. Underground, Arthur led Charles and Sadie through the old tunnel. Water dripped somewhere in the dark. Their lantern caught rotting support beams. Abandoned tools rusted to skeletons. A guard's voice echoed ahead. Charles's bow whispered, a soft grunt, then silence. They moved past the body like ghosts. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Chain gangs worked the rock face, backs scarred, shoulders bowed. Armed men walked the catwalks above, some already moving toward the commotion outside. "There," Sadie breathed, pointing. Behind iron bars, more prisoners huddled. Among them, Green's boys, faces gaunt in the lantern light. Boots approached. Arthur doused the lantern. They pressed against stone as guards rushed past, drawn by the chaos above. The moment stretched like a hangman's rope. "Now," Arthur whispered. They moved through darkness toward the cells, prayers and curses mingling in the stale air. Somewhere above, John and Bill's distraction reached its crescendo. A slow clap echoed through the mine shaft. Keller emerged from the shadows, like a snake uncoiling, uniform pristine despite the chaos around them. 2 guards flanked him, rifles trained on Arthur's group. Impressive, Keller said, voice cultured as any city man. Though I expected better from Vanderlin's boys. Bit melodramatic, isn't it? Arthur kept his hand loose near his holster. Behind him, the freed prisoners pressed back against the cell walls. Sadie and Charles stood ready, waiting. Know all about us, do you? Arthur's eyes never left Keller's hands. Oh, I make it my business to know, Keller smiled. All teeth and ice. Just like I know your type, Morgan. Man living in the past. World's changing. Men like me. We're the future. A future built on broken bodies, on stolen children. Built on strength. On taking what's there for the taking. Just like I'm about to take your life. The mine shaft held its breath. Water dripped somewhere in the dark. A timber creaked overhead. Last chance, Arthur said. Walk away. Proud words from a dead man. The world narrowed to heartbeats. Keller was fast, military trained, gunslinger quick. His draw was perfect, textbook smooth. Arthur was faster. 2 shots cracked like thunder in the confined space. Keller staggered, red blooming across his pristine uniform. His return shot went wide, sparking off stone. He looked almost surprised as he fell. Your future, Arthur said to the dying man, ends here. The guards dropped their rifles, hands rising. Above, the sounds of fighting died like a passing storm. Charles and Sadie moved quickly, securing weapons, freeing the last prisoners. Children cried out for parents. Families clutched each other in the lantern light. Green found his boys, gathering them in shaking arms. "Thank you," he managed. "Thank you." Arthur holstered his gun, the iron still warm. Keller's blood spread across the packed earth, soaking into the ground that had seen too much already. Outside, morning sunlight speared through gun smoke as the freed prisoners emerged, blinking like creatures too long in the dark. Sadie touched his arm. "You all right?" Arthur watched families reunite, watched Green lead his sons towards sunlight. Nearby, Charles helped an old man walk, while John and Bill secured the last of Keller's men. "Yeah," he said finally. "Reckon I am." Behind them, the mine's darkness receded, taking its secrets with it. Dryfield's people walked into morning light, carrying hope like a flame rekindled. Dawn painted Dryfield in new colors. Where fear had hung like smoke, now children played in the streets. Families held each other, tears mixing with laughter. The Peterson boy raced past, playing with Bill's wooden horse, while Charles helped men repair the broken church steps. Sarah Peterson approached Arthur, a basket in her hands. "It ain't much, but we all contributed." Inside lay bread, preserves, ammunition carefully wrapped in cloth. "No need for that, ma'am." "There's every need." Her voice was firm. "You gave us back our lives." Naomi Burke organized the rebuilding efforts, her voice carrying clear authority now that fear no longer haunted it. Women formed work parties, rehanging doors and mending broken windows. John and Green led teams boarding up the mine entrances, sealing away its dark memories. Even Bill found some purpose, teaching young men to shoot straight, to stand guard. "Never thought I'd see Dryfield standing tall again," Green said, watching his boys help Charles patch the general store's roof. "You didn't just save lives. You gave us back our dignity." The peace shattered with hard hoofbeats. a rider from Blackwater, face grim beneath trail dust. Pinkertons, he reported, breathing hard. 24 asking questions, moving this way. Arthur watched hope war with fear on the townspeople's faces. They'd just won their freedom. Now they might have to protect it again. "We'll go," he said quietly to Green. "Draw them away from here. You'll always have friends in Dryfield," Green answered, gripping his hands. "Any of you. Anytime." Night found them preparing to leave. The townspeople worked by lamplight, gathering supplies, mending tack, offering what help they could. Sarah Peterson distributed food while Naomi handed out fresh ammunition, each bullet wrapped carefully in cloth. "Strange thing," John said, peering beside Arthur. "Doing good work doesn't always feel good right away. Sometimes it sits heavy. Makes you question everything you knew." The moon rose full and bright as they mounted up. Dryfield's people lined the streets, men standing straighter, women holding children who no longer flinched at shadows. Green's boys waved from the steps of their reclaimed home. "Reckon we did something here," John said quietly. "Something that mattered." Arthur watched the town shrink behind them, lights beginning to twinkle in windows. Somewhere back there, a family would sleep peaceful tonight. Children would dream without fear. And maybe that was worth more than all Dutch's grand plans. The full moon lit their path as they rode, silver mixing with the last traces of sunset. Ahead lay uncertainty, Pinkertons, and whatever schemes Dutch was hatching back at camp. But for now, for this moment, they rode with a weight of purpose on their shoulders. Behind them, Dryfield stood renewed against the gathering night. Its windows glowed with warmth. Its people walked unafraid. Sometimes, Arthur thought, watching the stars emerge, you had to leave something behind to know you'd done right by it. They rode into darkness, carrying the memory of light.